Hello, you wonderful people. For today's video, I want to talk about 5 of my favorite fictional couples. Do note that these couples are not listed in any particular order. Number 1, Beckett and Castle from the TV show Castle. They've always had like this flirtatious relationship. There's always like that back and forth between them. Never being 100% honest about how they felt about each other, you know, whether it's out of some kind of trying to be professional, you know, not trying to jeopardize their partnership, but also because other things came up as well as other people came up that kind of get in between them. It's always, because it's literally always that situation of like, hey, get together already. We can obviously tell you, obviously both have a thing for each other, you're just not willing to admit it, which they eventually, you know, got together later on in the series, and then even further in the series eventually got married. What I love most about the relationship is that first and foremost they are partners, that they're always there for each other, they're always got each other's back. It's like they're very good at solving mysteries on their own, but they work even better together. That even through the most trying times they have each other's backs, especially when it came to stuff related to Beckett's mom. And yes, I will note, I do know the whole situation between the actors Nathan Fillion and Stana Katic, at least the rumors that spread about it. Obviously, I'm not going to go too deeply. Whether it's true or not, I mean, I'm not going to say it because I wasn't there. I don't know the whole situation. I do have a hard time like compartmentalizing that because it does kind of ruin the relationship, like their TV relationship. That combined with the fact is of how the series ended as well as just the whole circumstances behind that, like it does kind of ruin not just this relationship but the TV show in general, but it's still a relationship that I loved seeing grow as the series progressed. So I will, you know, it might be a little diluted because of just outside things, but I still hold this relationship to easily be one of my favorites. Number 2 on the list is Titus and Yuna from Final Fantasy X. Easily one of my favorite Final Fantasy couples, though they might actually be at the top of the list. I mean, more so because of the fact is that they believe so heavily in each other. Hell, like Yuna went through a lot of stuff to try and get Titus back in Final Fantasy X too. But also like the whole Xanarkin situation, whereas most people are like, oh, that's Sin's toxin talking. It's like, no, Yuna wholeheartedly believed him and she always, you know, and it's the same way worked for Titus. Like, you know, Titus might not have had the whole information about Yuna's whole pilgrimage and everything on, you know, what it meant to be a summoner, but he wholeheartedly believed in her that she'd be the one to kind of change, you know, Spira's destiny. I mean, for one, they also had that whole underwater makeout scene, which is like, to me, there's not too many Final Fantasy relationships, at least to my knowledge from the video games that I've experienced and played myself, that not many Final Fantasy characters are so blatant about how they feel about each other, especially to go out to such a degree, like making out like that. Granted, there are probably other examples that, you know, just aren't coming to my mind or in Final Fantasy games that I've never played. I mean, obviously you have like an example like Garnet and Zidane who like kiss at the end of the game, but still like to have a full-blown makeout session, and it's like literally probably like 3/4 of the way through the game when this all happens. So it's not even just like the end of the game type of thing. It's like, you know, there's still a bit of the journey left by the time that whole thing happens. Also looking at it from an artistic point of view, just how what that one scene means and just the context behind it and what makes it so special. I'd go as far as saying that's one of the most memorable scenes from that game. Like, it's easily one that always comes to my mind when I think Final Fantasy X. Number 3 on the list is Peg and Al from Married with Children. Easily a relationship of more downs than ups. They do have their back and forths, often insulting each other and tearing each other down. They can say some pretty mean things to each other. I mean, most times it seems like they really dislike each other, maybe even on some level hate each other, but even through it all they still in their own weird way actually legitimately love each other. Though I doubt Al would be the first one to admit that. Not the most healthy relationship, but I never said this was a list of perfect couples. These are just couples that I like. So truth be told, I think if they didn't have each other, I don't think they would have anyone at all. Number 4 on the list is Deadpool and Vanessa from the movie Deadpool. Not your typical couple. Both of them are from very interesting backgrounds, him being a mercenary, her being a prostitute. No judgment. What I like most about them is the fact is that they have very messed up senses of humor. There's that whole bit in the movie where they were trying to outdo each other, saying like who had the most messed up childhood, and they came up with some pretty messed up things to say. Most people can agree that when it comes to that movie, that's easily one of its best aspects is Deadpool and Vanessa's relationship, because it's a very believable love story, because in the grand scheme of things, that is like the centerfold of the story, that it is in fact a love story. I mean, they're also there for each other during the tough times. Obviously, Wade had his own issues of not wanting to be around her with cancer, but the fact of the matter is she wanted to be there for him through it all. Even, you know, even when it came to finding out what he really looks like now, what he's become, you know, they still love each other wholeheartedly. So, side note, I'm very excited to see what they do with Vanessa and Deadpool in Deadpool 2. Especially if they add in someone like Death or Domino and see what that would kind of do, whether it would actually have an influence or not. Not even sure if they'd be able to add in Death. I don't really know how that really shakes down with the whole Marvel situation, where Death would kind of fall under that whole situation, but that's a conversation for another video. And finally, number 5 is Adeline and Nick from the TV show Grimm. I will go ahead and say that me bringing this up on the list is a heavy spoiler for Grimm, especially if you're not caught up or if you've never watched the TV show, so sorry. But what I like most about this relationship is that it is the most unexpected relationship. Because obviously when it comes to Nick, you were like, so obviously like, oh, it's obviously going to be him and Juliet. But then circumstances play out, which obviously I won't spoil, but you know, that was no longer able to be a thing. I mean, when it comes to going back to it about the whole unexpected aspect, Adeline and Nick started off as enemies. He caused quite a bit of trouble in Nick's life. Obviously trying to kill him, messing with Hank and Juliet as a means of trying to get to Nick, taking his powers as a Grimm. And then there's also the biggest difference between them, him being a Grimm and her being a VIDS, and more specifically a Hexen Beast. Which does make you wonder what his mom would think about that whole relationship aspect. Obviously, if you've never watched the show Grimm, like me using the term Grimm, Vesen, or Hexen Beast means absolutely nothing to you. So that's an explanation for another video in its own entirely. So another interesting thing that comes up, and they even mention it in the show, is the fact is that they were each other's first. Nick was the first Grimm that Adeline had ever met, and Adeline was the first Vesen that Nick had ever met or seen. Very serendipitous. What's even crazier on top of that is the fact is that they have a kid together. And as I brought up on a Super Fantified podcast, without going into spoilers, some things have come up in the current season of Grimm that does make me wonder, will this relationship stay a thing or not? You know, without going too deep into it, there's a certain character that things are changing, and I'm sure that's going to complicate things going forward. That's kind of been my running thoughts about that. So whether that ends up being true or not, we'll just kind of have to wait to see how things play out. And so there goes some of my favorite fictional couples. Let me know in the comment down below some of your favorite fictional couples. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.